Roger Stone, for the next couple hours, is hosting right into War Room coming up. Roger, thanks for letting me jump in here. But listeners, please support us today. Make the commitment, or we're already going to have great victory into the future off of all the things we've done. And I know we're going to win, but I want to win handily. And it's so easy if you commit to buy the products. We will expand. We won't just continue on. We will expand. We will be victorious. Roger, go ahead. Sorry for taking over.
Alex, many thanks. You know, I think it was Nietzsche that said, that which does not kill me makes me stronger. I agree with Alex Jones. Do the lefties not understand that these personal attacks on us, these threats to kill my wife, my family, my children, and perhaps worst of all, my beloved dogs, this only makes me angrier and stronger and more firm in my resolve to expose the globalists, to expose the globalists, and expose those who would destroy the foundations and principles of America. CBS has a little film that they put up. Let's show that, because it shows you how vicious the attack has become.
So he's been vetted, and he's really great. So you're in this.
We're having some technical difficulties because we're doing two studios between each other today, but that's okay. It's live, it's worldwide, and we're going to break here in a minute, so we'll probably come back up to there. But for radio listeners, we can go over some of this for people and just break down how savage and how vicious they've gotten. How long is this clip, guys? And then I can introduce it to you, and we can come back to it after the break.
We'll come back to it after the break. Coming up, we're going to take your calls. So I want to point out 888-201-2244. We're going to be taking them both in the Balance of the Alex Jones Show. We're going to be taking them in the War Room as well. This is my favorite part of being on InfoWars, because so many people, as I move around, ask me, why don't you take more calls? They like the interactive nature of what we do here, and we like to hear from patriots. We want to hear what's on your mind. And while you're at it, I want to say one more time, Brain Force at an extraordinary discount right now on the Infowars.com store. I was up all night last night, folks, in Washington, D.C., doing high-level meetings to try to get a grip on what the globalists have in mind for our president. And without Brain Force, I would be unable, literally, to do this broadcast.
And by the way, Roger, we're not just, you've got the intel coming up that they plan to remove Trump by December. I forgot to bring that up. And he's got that CBS clip coming up, too. Roger Stone, straight ahead. Stay with us.
Welcome back. I am Roger Stone, sitting in for my compatriot, Alex Jones. I'm a proud member of the InfoWars team. And it was here on InfoWars that it was revealed to the world that President Donald Trump would declassify the controversial, still secret, and closely held John F. Kennedy assassination records. You see, in 1992, the Congress, in the wake of the impact of Oliver Stone's monumental film, JFK, passed legislation that set specific timelines for the release of this bombshell data. Even in the initial releases in the 80s and 90s, the deep state, the military-industrial complex, indeed, those responsible for the murder of President Kennedy, managed to redact and censor and hold back much of the data. When I spoke to the President of the United States 2 Thursdays ago, only 2 days before his historic tweet announcing that he would release this classified information, he was most interested in transparency. He was most interested in full disclosure. And as I predicted, the deep state, the Central Intelligence Agency principally, caught by surprise, had to move into high gear on a rear guard action to redact, that means black out, censor, and hold back as much of the data as possible, hoping that the American people would learn little and that their myth that Lee Harvey Oswald, a communist nut acting alone, shot President John Fitzgerald Kennedy 3 times from the back. Unfortunately, now, thanks to President Trump's courageous and bold decision, that narrative hasn't held up. What have we learned? Well, one paragraph that was brought to the fore in this release shows that the Surgeon General of the United States concluded that John Kennedy had been shot from the front and that the bullet entered at the neck, at the trachea, which is why a tracheotomy was hastily performed on him to hide that entry wound. Big problem for the government. What else did we learn? Well, we learned that the Russian KGB conducted their own independent investigation into John Kennedy's murder, and they determined that Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ himself, old big ears, was the man who orchestrated the death of his predecessor. You see, Lyndon Johnson knew that the Kennedy Justice Department was hot on his heels in both the Bobby Baker and Billy Saul Estes corruption investigations. And he knew that Attorney General Robert Kennedy wanted him not only off the 1964 ticket, but he also wanted him in a federal penitentiary. Yes, LBJ was the man staring into the abyss. We also learned in the new disclosures that French intelligence, at the request of First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, conducted their own investigation, and they determined that Lyndon Baines Johnson was the ringleader of the plot to kill our president. What else did we learn? Well, we learned that Lyndon Johnson, as a young congressman in his early political career, was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. That puts him up there with Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia. No wonder they wanted this information withheld and kept from the American people. After all, Lyndon Johnson, who styles himself the civil rights president, even though in his years in the Senate, he blocked every major piece of voting rights, housing rights, or civil rights legislation, was reinventing himself for the consumption of the American voters. LBJ, a member of the KKK. We also learned that the government was aware of 2 witnesses who saw 2 men running from the site of the murder of the Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit, and that neither one of those men met the physical description of Lee Harvey Oswald. We also learned that the casings found on the ground at the site of Oswald's alleged shooting of Tippit were from an automatic weapon. Yet, when Lee Harvey Oswald is arrested at the Texas movie theater, only minutes later, he's found with a revolver. So more and more information coming to the fore from President Donald Trump's historic decision. Next up is going to be an examination of the incendiary diaries of the legendary CIA agent and agent provocateur E. Howard Hunt. It was InfoWars and Alex Jones who broke the story of the deathbed confessions of Hunt, who said and told InfoWars that he was on the ground in Dallas, that the operation in Dealey Plaza was indeed a CIA operation, that General Edwin Lansdale of the CIA was present, and yes, my favorite, LBJ, he said, was running the show. We'll have more on that in InfoWars down the road. Now, we are going to be taking your calls here shortly. Again, the number 888-201-2244. But before we get to that, I want to mention something that Alex Jones pointed out. We don't have wealthy billionaires standing in the wings ready to write giant checks to underwrite our fight against the globalists. We don't have a George Soros or a Rockefeller Foundation or a Ford Foundation or any of these extremely well-heeled operations. We have to depend on you, and we can only depend on you. That's why it's crucial you go to the Infowars.com store, where Silver Bullet, the incredible colloidal silver product, is now on sale for 50% off. I don't know how Alex Jones slashes these prices and does it successfully. I guess it means we can move more product, more volume, but that is what is paying for this beautiful new studio. That is what's paying for our expanded programming on the War Room. It's only because patriots like you have stepped forward and gotten some of the very best all-natural products you can find anywhere in the market today. But when you help yourself, you help us. Now, I particularly like the T-shirts, the First Amendment-oriented T-shirts. And let me say this. When I speak around the country, when I spoke in Salt Lake City this weekend, at least 3 people showed up wearing their classic Bill Clinton rape T-shirts. Now, this T-shirt is still available at the Infowars.com store, but not for much longer. This piece is going to end up in the Smithsonian, folks. Get it while you can. When these run out, there will be no more. And I want to see them out there as I travel the country and I speak, because it's a way of identifying like-minded patriots. So, folks, go to the Infowars.com store. Give us your support. We will give you the truth. We will continue to expose the upcoming coup d'etat against our president, Donald Trump. I've been to Washington. I know what they have planned. Stay with us. We're going to be laying it all out for you on The Alex Jones Show and later at the War Room. Go. I'm Roger Stone, sitting in for my compatriot and comrade, Alex Jones. We're in the foxhole together, in a war against the globalists. Make no bones about it. Those who opposed Donald Trump in the last election, those who thought his election incredibly improbable, are committed to removing him from public office. But we here at InfoWars, we're not going to let that happen. When I attacked that dainty little snowflake, Don Lemon, on my Twitter feed, little did I know that the Twitter feed Uber censors would use that to close down my 300,000 follower Twitter feed. Now, the folks at Stone Cold Truth on Twitter still follow my exploits, and although I don't control that site, you can keep up with my activities if you go there. And you can also catch up with what I'm doing on the InfoWars Twitter feed. So I invite you to go to both. And there's a petition up at Stone Cold Truth to the Twitter mavens demanding the improbable reinstatement. I will see these folks in court. You see, it's time for Twitter to be regulated like a utility, and we will push until our First Amendment rights are protected. Now, let's go to your phone calls, my favorite part of the show. Robert in Washington, what's on your mind?
Roger, how are you today?
Terrific.
So my thing is, and I see what's going on with November 4th. I've been trying to tell a lot of my friends and family, prepare for something, worst case scenario, something doesn't happen. What if this is just another way to discredit the alt media? You guys prepare for something big, nothing happens, they come back and say, look at another, lie that they tried to portray on the news and get everybody to believe.
Well, I must tell you, I think that is unlikely, because what I found out yesterday is that this agate prop that they have planned for the streets, that they are ginning up with their Tom Steyer paid-for TV commercials, with their Soros-financed full-page newspaper ads, that's just one part of the plot. This is part and parcel of an effort to try to invoke the 25th Amendment. Now, under the 25th Amendment of the Constitution, if a majority of the cabinet and the vice president decide that the president is non-compos mentis, that he is no longer mentally stable and able to fulfill the duties of his office, he shall be removed. Now, the president can appeal that question to the U.S. House of Representatives, but why do we think the rhinos who control the House Republican caucus would be of a mind to keep Donald Trump in place? We're going to be outlining this whole nefarious plot this week on InfoWars, but I see a political synergy here where the street operations paid for by Steyer and Soros and others jibe with the maneuverings of Jeb Bush and Ben Sass and others in Washington who are attempting to engineer this 25th Amendment coup. I can report definitively here on InfoWars private meetings between Senator Sass and Vice President Pence very, very recently. What was that meeting about, Senator? Let's go to Deborah in California. Deborah, what's your question for InfoWars today?
My question is, isn't it almost treason to put out that ad in the New York Times that said we're trying to take the government down?
Well, that's the great thing about our Constitution and the First Amendment. Although they don't respect it at Twitter, we do respect it here at InfoWars. You see, I'm against censorship. I don't care if you're the looniest, most whacked out left-winger in the world. Other than physical threats of violence, threats to kill my wife and my family and my dogs, pretty much everything else, in my view, is fairly protected speech. But I do agree with you in this sense. They have shown their hand. And these are interrelated operations. This is not some street rabble paid for by George Soros. They are working with members of the political establishment, both Republican and Democrat, at the highest levels to attempt to achieve what they could not achieve at the ballot box, which is the removal of our president. Thank you very much for your call. Now let's go to Jude in Cincinnati. Jude, don't bring me down. What is your question?
I get that.
I bet you do.
Big fan of yours. So a big story that I've been personally researching and thinking that is like it isn't fairly covered and kind of ties everything in is really Hillary's dating back when she became Secretary of State. She was taking a lot of money into her foundation from even like Qatar. And then when Libya happened, you know, that whole thing with Gaddafi, we know, you know, Benghazi turned into the real story, but it was really, she was allowing Qatar to fund rebel groups in this country. And then that broke out sort of into Syria because then they were funneling those fighters. They're basically mercenaries. CIA's training them to Syria. And like the guy that was on previously saying, you know, these guys, they're either Sharia or not. They're committing jihad. A lot of these people that they were training committed jihad in Syria, created this huge refugee crisis. And the people that hate nationalism, that really led to the nationalist movements, that refugee crisis.
Well, you raise a good point, and I guess I would say if you want to know what's going to happen, watch what happened in Ukraine very carefully. Because what happened there is that the billionaire globalist Viktor Pinchuk paid the Clinton Foundation so much money that he was allowed to mount a neo-Nazi coup, overturning the democratically elected government of Ukraine. And it's interesting that their slogan, blood and soil, pops up as the slogan allegedly of the Antifa antis at Charlottesville. Coincidence? I think not. It is exactly the same kind of coup that they have in mind here in the United States. Bill and Hillary Clinton are traitors. They worship the almighty dollar. They are not liberals. They are not progressives. They're not even globalists. They are just greedy criminals. And you could purchase from them virtually anything. In this case, the United States government agreed to look the other way while a violent coup was mounted against the democratically elected government of Ukraine. That is what they have in mind here in the United States. Jude, thank you for your call. Daniel in Alabama, a state that recently made major news with the rejection of Senator Luther Strange, the hand-picked candidate of Senator Mitch McConnell, and instead nominated in the Republican primary Judge Roy Moore, a constitutionalist. Daniel, what's on your mind?
Yes, I just wanted to talk about the JFK files. Y'all keep saying that Trump's released them all, and he's only released the files associated with JFK's assassination.
Well, in fact, I'll go a step further. I would like to see the president go back and review the material that was already previously released under the 1992 JFK Records Act, which is far too heavily redacted, which means blacked out, in my opinion. I'd like to see him do with that material what he has just ordered be done with the more recent disclosures, which is get rid of the redactions, get rid of the blackings out. And the president came up with a very clever and I think smart response to his deep state handlers. He's happy to withhold any information that revolves around or regards people who are still living today. That is very, very, very few in terms of involvement in this data. So, yes, I will be calling on the president to release it all, and the sooner, the better. I'm Roger Stone. You're on the Alex Jones Show, and we'll be back for more of your calls. Welcome back. You're in the War Room, and we're going to be taking some of your calls a little later in the program. That number, 888-201-2244. I'm joined by my colleague, Owen Schroyer. Now, I know Jake Tapper is very, very upset. You see, word has gotten back to him that he's being dropped from my international best dressed list for this year, and he's being replaced by Owen Schroyer. Wow. Yes, Jake, I know it's a crushing blow, but I've had it with your...
Don't mention blow around Jake.
Good point. I've had it with your antics, your propaganda, I remember the days when you were once a journalist, but they're on to you, Jake. People know that virtually nothing you say can be believed, and just in terms of raw numbers, there's far more Americans watching us here at InfoWars than watching your pap. Owen?
Well, it's actually amazing, Roger. I know that you've actually met a lot of these people. I've met Jake Tapper, Don Lemon. When you actually meet these fake news talking heads, it's actually incredible. I mean, most of them are pretty much just total cucks. They can't talk to you. They can't handle a real conversation. They have 3 or 4 people that are basically their handlers, running them around, steering them which way to go. I actually give Van Jones credit. I mean, I disagree with just about all of his politics, but Van Jones at least seems like a real guy. He doesn't have a bunch of carriers that carry him around, and he actually speaks his mind, I feel like. Again, I completely disagree with almost everything he says, but I think he's actually a real guy, unlike a Jake Tapper, who's a total fop.
Well, I ran into Van Jones coming out of a studio. He was coming in just the other day. He asked for a selfie. It was very pleasant. We don't agree. And I said, Van, I will give your regards to your cousin, Alex. So let's roll this CBS hit piece that they put up the other day. You see, between the release of the JFK documents, my outlining a plan for a special prosecutor to expose Uranium One and derail the Mueller takedown of Manafort and Trump, this is what we got from CBS.
By most accounts, almost all of the people protesting.
Now, there's no soundtrack on this. It is a hit piece put together recently to try, I guess, to discredit me in an effort to try to limit my availability, or I should say my access to social media. Today, I learned, for example, that the official feed for the Netflix documentary, Get Me Roger Stone, has also been suspended on Twitter. Yesterday, I met with a number of high-level, the very best telecommunications lawyers in the country to talk about a legal takedown of Twitter. You see, we are going to end the censorship, and we are going to have them ultimately regulated like a utility. There you see on CBS, I am straightening out for Charlie Rose the falsehood that I was trafficking with a Russian hacker named Guccifer 2.0. He turns out is neither a hacker nor is he a Russian. But that's the kind of propaganda piece you see coming from the mainstream media. Owen, they're on the run. They know we're exposing them, and therefore they have to cut us off. That's the thing about today's left. They're not like the liberals of the 60s and 70s. Those folks wanted civil debate. They would argue with you on the merits, on the issues. These people, oh, we need to shut Owen Schroyer up. Just shut up, because they can't beat us in honest debate.
And that's a sign of victory. That is honestly what this is. When you see us getting censored on all of these social media platforms, from YouTube, the algorithms blocking us from showing up first on Google, when they suspend Roger Stone's Twitter account for tweeting nothing but the ugly truth. Unfortunately for Don Lemon, it's just the ugly truth. But he brags about that on a New Year's broadcast, but we don't need to go down that path. But it ultimately is a sign of victory. They cannot beat us in a battle of wits. They cannot beat us in a battle of ideas. They cannot beat us in a battle of intellect. So because they can't actually win in the battlefield for ideas and for liberty, they just shut you up. We can't beat Roger Stone, so let's just shut him down.
Yeah, I don't think it will work. Those who want to follow my exploits on Twitter can do so at the InfoWars Twitter feed or at the Stone Cold Truth Twitter feed, where my followers pretty well chronicle what I am up to. You know, we kid a lot about our clothing here on the War Room because Owen and I are both clothes horse. We understand the concept of look good, feel good. But the media seems to be obsessed now with the extraordinary spending habits of Paul Manafort. We learned from today's New York Times, lifting it from the Mueller indictment, that Manafort spent $1.3 million on his clothing and spent $500,000 at one unnamed men's store in Beverly Hills, California alone. Now, I've known Manafort a long time, and his taste runs to custom Italian suits with a more padded shoulder, a higher armhole, more closely fitted to the body. Not necessarily the right cut for a middle-aged man of some proportions. Just because Manafort's clothes were expensive does not mean that they particularly fit well. But to each his own. He always has had and has impeccable taste on his collection of shirts and ties. The reason for this onslaught against his sartorial budget, of course, is to create resentment of Manafort's legally gained wealth. Let's be very clear. They keep talking about his lobbying for Ukraine. He did not lobby for Ukraine. He ran political campaigns in Ukraine, regulated by the laws in that country. That is a perfectly legal endeavor, which means the money that he's accused of moving around Europe is not dirty money to begin with, and therefore moving it around cannot be constituted as money laundering. I've talked to some of the very best white-collar attorneys in the country in the last 48 hours. The case against Manafort is a weak one. They'll have a hard time winning a conviction. And as you know, Owen, none of it relates to Russia. So now this guy, Papadopoulos, pops up. I've never heard of him, and I was in pretty extensive touch with the Trump campaign. He has no authority. He didn't even have a security entrance card for the headquarters. He was never on the payroll. He's a volunteer. But they're going to claim that his bombarding Trump campaign officials with requests to meet with high-level Russians constitutes the collusion, the coordination they've been looking for. I don't think that dog will hunt.
Well, Roger, it's strange that this is apparently there's two more sealed indictments. This is the first in the round. But usually with these type of cases, what they'll do is they'll bring out the biggest charges they have first in order to create some fear in the opposition. If this is the biggest charge they got nothing. Of course, we already know that they had nothing. But what's interesting about Papadopoulos, Roger, if my timeline is accurate here, he actually worked more for the deep state as an undercover operative than he did the Trump campaign.
It appears that way. First of all, he goes to a long succession of neocon think tanks. Then suddenly he's in bed with the Russians. So he's at the Jamestown Institute. Then he's at the Hudson Institute. These are virulently anti-Russian, pro-neocon fronts. And then suddenly overnight, he's the one advocating meetings with the Russians. I think I can shed light on these two new sealed indictments. They're going to indict Paul Manafort's driver for double parking, and they're nailing his housekeeper.
All right, welcome back to the War Room, guys. I was trying to tell you that we need to get Roger Stone's earpiece plugged in. That's why we were having that confusion. But welcome back to the War Room. Owen Schroyer, Roger Stone with you. We were just responding to the Twitter censors and how they want to block Roger, and it's really just a victory. But Roger, I don't know if you wanted to get into this now, but you handed me this document basically breaking down what appears to be LBJ associated with the KKK.
Yeah, I mentioned this on the Alex Jones Show, an extraordinary document which comes out of the classified documents that President Donald Trump ordered released, in which we learn that a source tells the government that the original Knights of the Ku Klux Klan of Texas have produced documentary proof that President Lyndon Johnson was formerly a member of the Klan in Texas prior to his days in the U.S. House of Representatives. What's particularly interesting is a stamp on this document that shows that a copy was sent to Clyde Tolson, who is the top assistant deputy director to J. Edgar Hoover. Now you see why they wanted this information classified. Lyndon Baines Johnson, like Robert Byrd, a member of the virulently anti-black and almost all Democrat Ku Klux Klan.
Started by the Democrats, obviously. People make the joke the last time we saw the Democrats this upset as they are with Trump was when people took their slaves away, so they formed the KKK. That's a bit of history that people don't really want to talk about. But Roger, you know what's amazing to me about the JFK files being released? We got a lot of bombshells in these files. The government putting implants in the media, the government staging terror attacks, the government lying about what happened to JFK. But, you know, perhaps the biggest bombshell is the fact that it's now admitting that Hitler escaped from Nazi Germany to South America. So are they editing the textbooks that our children are reading? No. Now, what about all the people that go to the streets and claim that Trump is Hitler? Trump is Hitler. Trump is a Nazi. Silence from them the fact that the government lied about Hitler and the fact he was able to live and escape to South America. Silence from all the leftists that compared Trump to Hitler, but aren't even bothered by the fact our government lied about Hitler, and it was Trump that has now exposed that and made that public. How come they ignore that, Roger?
I'm not familiar with that disclosure, Owen. Where did you see that?
So it's in multiple Hoover letters from a while ago, but in the JFK, here you go. Here's the story from Infowars.com. It basically says that multiple countries in South America, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, etc., were working with officials from the Nazi regime, and the U.S. had intelligence that Hitler had indeed escaped to South America and essentially set himself up a life in Argentina. And we just had 2 months ago a trove of Nazi artifacts found in Argentina. So again, it just corroborates what we already knew, which was then released in the JFK files. So it's just amazing that all of this stuff gets released from Trump. He's the one that says he wants transparency. He actually is the most transparent president in my lifetime. I'm sure that you could perhaps say the same, maybe since JFK, or even more transparent. And they don't even appreciate it. They don't even care. Yeah, there's the story. Hidden trove of Nazi artifacts found in Argentina. And then the JFK papers just, again, confirm what we already suspected. Hitler escaped to South America.
Owen, I think the larger question here is, why has the deep state, why are the intelligence agencies moving so aggressively to cover up things that, let's face it, happened 50, 60, 70 years ago? Here's the answer, I believe. Because it shows the same tactics and the same MO today as then. The lying, the fabricating, the hiding, the covering up, the leaking.
The fake media.
The infiltration of the media. The things that they did then are the same exact things that they're doing now. And that is, in my opinion, what it is they don't want the American people to know. The tactics being used on JFK are the same tactics being used on Donald Trump. So far, that has been absent murder.
Well, they'd love to go there. You know that.
There's no question about it. I pray for the president's safety and the safety of his family every single night, because he is such a threat to the established order. He is such a threat to the two-party duopoly that has run this country into the ground. That's why they are so hysterical. He's mentally unbalanced. He's crazy. No, it's you that you're projecting. It is them that they are upset about. And then, as I indicated on the Alex Jones show, when these political insiders, someone who was just with Jeb Bush, someone who was just with a major Republican U.S. senator, and they tell you calmly, oh, don't worry about Trump. He'll be gone by December. And then you see these newspaper ads and the Tom Steyer financed television ads whipping people into a hysteria. These are related incidents. The political establishment is working with Soros and the rabble in the streets for what Alex Jones, the first guy I know, has called it, November 4th uprising. This is coming, folks. Make no doubt whatsoever about it. Alex Jones has called this. Here's further proof, a multi-$1,000 ad in the New York Times. The counter-revolution is coming, and we're going to have to beat it back. We're going to have no choice.
We'll find out who paid for that advertisement. Obviously, we can all just assume it was George Soros, but I'm sure that we'll get to the bottom of that. Maybe the New York Times will release that, maybe not. They've already been exposed by Project Veritas. But
what I did learn in my trip to Washington is that the military, the police, the security services, they're taking this threat very carefully. So Antifa may be biting off more than they can chew. Make no mistake about it. The rank and file law enforcement officers in this country, men and women who are patriots, they will rise to the occasion if there's an illegitimate attempt to seize power on November 4th.
You know, speaking of political ads, right before we get to this break here, remember the political ad that came out maybe like 72 hours ago now, where it was a Democrat paid for ad depicting the white male as the terrorist trying to run down the kids in the streets in his truck? You remember that? Less than 48 hours after that Democrat paid for ad depicting the white male as a terrorist airs, a Muslim terrorist actually rents a truck and murders 8 people in New York City. Do you think the Democrats will retract that ad? Do you think maybe the Democrats gave the guy the idea? What about that? Anybody ever thought of that? I don't think the Democrats are going to apologize for this one, Roger.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
Well, we'll be right back. Again, it was Senator Chuck Schumer's legislation that led to this terrorist being in the country. We'll be right back with more from Roger Stone. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to the War Room. I'm Roger Stone with my colleague Owen Schroyer, and we're going to go to the phones because the InfoWarriors have been waiting a while. Nick in Detroit, what's on your mind, Nick?
What you do for the American people.
Go ahead and start from the top, Nick.
Hi, Roger. Hi, Owen. I just wanted to talk to you about Alex. Alex needs to talk to his friend Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan had Tom DeLonge on the other day, talking about full disclosure for alien life, and Tom DeLonge was in the Podesta emails from WikiLeaks. John Podesta is a huge UFO researcher, and something scary to think about. So,
very interesting. Well, I am not all that familiar with all of Mr. Podesta's emails, and let me say again for the record, I had no advance notice that they would be hacked and released. When I said that John Podesta's time in the barrel would come, it's because I had read the Panama Papers in January of 2016, and they outlined the shady business dealings with the oligarchs around Vladimir Putin. There's the bank deal, the gas deal, and of course now most famous, the uranium deal. The mainstream media was absolutely right, Owen. There was a major party candidate nominated by one of our 2 political parties who was in bed with Vladimir Putin. The problem is it wasn't Donald Trump. It was Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and again, Paul Manafort is somebody that was not even endeared by the Russians. He didn't really even have a good relationship with the Russians because of his work in Ukraine, that you could say kind of, was a slight to Russia.
Well, he pushed Viktor Yanukovych, the candidate of a Democratic political party that elected him, to join the European Union, which was exactly antithetical to what Vladimir Putin wanted. Yep. Putin happens to hate Paul Manafort. There's the irony.
Yeah, and just to address what he was saying about Tom DeLonge on the Rogan podcast, I've had multiple people mention this to me. I've not listened to that podcast, but I don't know. Maybe if Alex is listening and he wants to reach out to Joe and try to get Tom on, it could be certainly could be an interesting interview.
Again, our number for phone calls, 888-201-2244. Here is your opportunity. If you have a question for Owen or for myself, we'll take all comers. Patty in New York, what do you have to say for us today, Patty?
God bless you, Roger Stone.
Thank you.
And Alex Jones and Owen, of course. But, of course, the President of the United States, my prayers are always with him. I just wanted you to know that I canceled cable because of Don Lemon and his smugness and his arrogance. That one's for you, Roger.
Well, I appreciate that. I saw him on recently, and he was saying that, a lot of people here at CNN criticize the president, but I'm the one the president's obsessed with. When I criticize the president, it really bothers him. I've talked to the president. He only vaguely knows who Don Lemon is. He's not obsessed with him in any way. He barely knows who the fellow is. So nice try, Don, but the president of the United States is not lying awake at night worrying about what you think, and certainly not about what you're wearing.
Yeah.
Patty, I'm sorry, I cut you off there. Do you have a question? Or do you have something else to say?
I just said that we all need to support the InfoWar and InfoWars, and I purchased Alexapure and Z-Shield, and I'm waiting on my order for Silver Bullet and Winter Sun and DNA Force, and I'm getting the T-shirt that Millie wears. I don't want to say it wrong, Moan Labe.
Yes.
Moan Labe, yes.
Excellent.
Yes,
Well, God bless you,
and
Patty. Thank you so much. And
okay.
I can hear your little friend barking there in the background. And
he won't stop. I'm sorry.
No,
And the
that's
pin
great.
that Owen wears.
We're dog lovers here at InfoWars. I
Okay.
assure you,
All right, that's
we are.
Gus. Gus won't mind his business.
Thank you so much for your
right.
call.
Gus is listening to the right broadcast, though.
No,
You got to give
no-
the credit to Gus there.
No question.
Probably smarter than Don Lemon, too.
The info dogs, as we call them. I have two. My new puppies, Mimi and Pee-wee 2.0. I want to point out right now, he is not a Russian agent.
Well, wait. If I'm recalling correct, you've actually your pets have actually been attacked by the left.
No, there's no question. I posted a picture of
Your own pets.
Posted a picture on Twitter of my two new puppies, Yorkshire Terriers, who are just incredibly lovable and a new part of the Stone family. And then some whack job called for them to be killed. I checked. That person is still allowed to tweet. They're not suspended.
Oh, okay.
How strange.
Yeah, that is strange, isn't it?
So let's see what we've got on the board here. Ty in Ohio, the state that is, of course, the cornerstone of Donald Trump's historic political victory. Ty, what's on your mind?
How you doing today, Mr. Stone?
Excellent.
Hey, I was just wanting to know if you guys have heard anything. We here in Ohio, we've been having new media outlet, and they pretty much are pretty radical. I don't know if you guys have heard anything about that yet.
Well, I'm sorry. What did you say? You're having new media? What?
It's pretty much like radicalized.
Are you talking about
everybody
local
says
television media? Can you be more specific?
It's pretty much in the Dayton area, from where I've been seeing it.
So you're talking about local Dayton media becoming radical leftists?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
When I first moved up here from Kentucky, it wasn't bad at all. But I can't even watch news up here anymore. It's getting terrible.
You know,
that would definitely be something to check into.
I'd like to look into that. You know, one of the things that's amazing to me is that Ohio has really been the linchpin for the election of presidents, and Mitt Romney and John McCain struggled mightily, spent hundreds of millions of dollars to try to win there, and they both fell short. Donald Trump, I can tell you, was never less than 5 points ahead in Ohio, and despite the fact that the Republican machine under Governor John Kasich was working overdrive against him, he handily carried the state. Ohio, in all honesty, in our calculations, was never in doubt. So perhaps that's why they are moving a more radicalized media there in preparation for 2020. Just speculation on my part.
And I would imagine if that's happening in Dayton, it's probably happening in Cleveland, probably happening in Cincinnati. You know, those are the big voter bases that they need to vote Democrat. That's what they rely on, the inner cities. That's how they rely on winning these elections. They know that everybody outside the inner city is at least not radical left. At least they're fair-minded, so they won't go totally left. So they rely on those big city, inner city votes.
Another call from the Buckeye State, Kathleen from Ohio. Kathleen, what's on your mind today for the War Room?
Yes. Hello, Roger. Hello, Owen. I just wanted to mention the moment that you announced that Twitter had suspended your account for 3 hours and 22 minutes, I immediately thought of the Skull and Bones number, 322.
Yes.
I don't think that's a mistake.
You're the second person to point that out to me. Look,
I thought I was the first.
No, you were the second, but it's a legitimate point, and I'm glad you brought it up because I hadn't forgotten to do so. Look, I think that I was very specifically suspended because the Manafort indictment was already in the works. It's outrageous, by the way, that the indictment itself leaked. You notice CNN knew that there were sealed indictments and they hyped them all weekend. When I spoke to Paul Manafort on Saturday afternoon, he literally knew nothing of this. So it was a terror tactic used by Mr. Mueller, leaking a big part of their dirty tricks arsenal. Here on The War Room, and we'll be right back.